I didn't call you today, but.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education Superintendents Advisory Council meeting. I'm going to open up with a few reminders. If you'd like to make a comment, please pick up a card from Ms. Lalonde. She's filling in for Ms. Rossi. All council members, please speak clearly into your microphones and make sure your microphone is on. And at this time, we will turn it over to Ms. Lalonde. Roll call.
Dr. Bartholomew, not present. Mr. Burton,
Present.
present. Mr. Cole, not present. Mr. Filer is not present. Mr. Corley is not present. Dr. Eloy, not present. Dr. Fountain,
Present.
here. Dr. Gray,
Here.
here. Mr. Geis,
Here.
Mr. Javi is not present. Mr. Jones,
Here.
Dr. Joseph,
Here.
Mr. Martin,
Here.
Dr. Woodland,
Here.
Mr. Powell,
Here.
Ms. Stilley, not present. Dr. Stokes,
Here.
here. Ms. Strong is not present. Mr. Touche, not present. Dr. Van Metre is not present. Dr. Waterland,
Here.
and Dr. Walter.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a note. I know the last few meetings have been moved time-wise. I think that's been a challenge for some superintendents to attend this meeting. I'd also like to give special recognition. I believe our board president, our vesting president, Mr. Morris, is in attendance, as well as Mr. Appel. Thank you for your attendance. With that said, can I entertain a move for the approval of minutes from November 8, 2024?
So, second.
First by Dr. Gray, second by Mr. Geis. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. That motion carries. The minutes are approved. We will move to agenda item 3.1, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding kindergarten screeners. That said, I'll turn it over to our state superintendent. Okay, I entertain a motion to receive the update on kindergarten readiness.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Geis, second by Dr. Joseph. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks for everyone being here today. Glad to see you. Had the opportunity to be in some of your systems last week and had some great conversations, and it was really affirming visit around a number of different areas. Had great conversations around differentiated pay and some of the systems that are using that for math, some for special education, some for merit. So, you know, for me, having pushed in on that for several years now, it was great to hear some of those conversations. Also, some of the work around tutoring that we were hearing about was fantastic, and I'm excited about what you guys are doing there in year one, kind of at scale there, year one, and, you know, thinking about what year two could look like. Was excited about some of the work-based learning conversations that we had, and would also acknowledge Bessie for the tour that they're doing around the state, kind of talking about that and raising awareness. So lots of exciting moving pieces right now in a very hard work, which is the field of education. So thank you all for all that you do. We've had ongoing conversation around assessments for some period of time. And as I've been very candid with you all, I do think that Louisiana students take too many tests. But I also believe that tests are really important so that we can understand where students are, and it can help drive both policy decisions, but to some degree instructional decisions. And so we, as I've used the same term, I think we have to be surgical in the way in which we approach testing reductions so that we get good information still, but that students aren't excessively testing. There's also no doubt that Louisiana provides more assessments than most other states, and that's no secret there. None of us created this particular situation. It is what it is, but we're trying to be surgical in the way in which we roll through that. We announced a few months back that this particular LEAP test, this particular testing session that's coming up, we would be able to reduce the amount of questions, the amount of time that students take testing by about 20 to 30%. And someone in the press, I don't know who, said, well, that's just a Band-Aid. I thought they would say, good job, Dr. Brumley, keep going, but that's not what we heard. So this upcoming LEAP cycle, there will be that reduction. We had to be comfortable and we had to work with psychometricians to know that if we did indeed reduce the amount of test questions, that we could still get reliable and valid information, and we can. And so this cycle, you'll have that reduction. We're going to be announcing additional reductions in due time. Some of that will come sooner than later as we work through this. But the purpose of today's agenda item is dealing with, this is the kindergarten screener. Yeah, is the kindergarten screener. And so as you know, kindergartners have to take the kindergarten screener. Now kindergartners are also taking the literacy screener. They'll be taking the math screener. My preference would be that we would align our efforts and just focus in terms of readiness on the academic content of reading and math, and whether or not that's those kids are developmentally appropriate in terms of readiness there. And so what we intend to do, and we've already taken this to a council dealing with early childhood education, is remove that kindergarten readiness screener that teachers are having to give to kindergartners. So that would be one additional assessment that we would be removing. We think we can do that and feel comfortable because of the literacy screener that's in place. We think that's going to give us good information. The math screener that comes into place next year. So wanted to just provide information on that. Ashley Townsend is going to give some more information, but that's like the rationale. One, it will reduce testing, but two, it will create more of a focus on academic content for K-12 learners as opposed to other layers of content. So actually, you want to provide some additional information there.
All right, you handled most of what I was going to share, so thank you for that. Just wanted to point out the progress being made in reading, and we're so excited about that. Just wanting to make sure that we eliminate barriers where we can to help everyone focus on what is really going to help propel our students forward and make them readers so they can be leaders as they get older. So again, reducing that kindergarten assessment at the beginning for the kindergarten readiness screener, we'll keep in the literacy and then add in the numeracy. And I think one really important thing that we've had in mind as we've thought about this is that this is a screener, this literacy and numeracy screener, with a response. If it returns a finding that the student is below level, there's something that happens. And the school knows what to do, and the teachers know what to do, and there are interventions in place, and then we check to see whether those interventions are working and adjust them as needed. And there's a system in place to respond whenever the screener shows that a student needs additional support. So we really want to capitalize on that, make sure that teachers have time at the beginning of the year to conduct that, to make those plans, and be able to respond for assessment so that more students can be ready for lesson 1 on day 1. I think one important point that I wanted to call out as well is just the heroic work that kindergarten teachers are doing, the amount of progress that we see them make from the beginning of the year in kindergarten to the middle to the end of the year. I think this year we had close to 20 percentage points of students who were below proficiency at the beginning of the year and then increased to proficiency at the middle of the year, and that's really huge. So where can we help facilitate that work? Where can we provide some more information even for our early childhood leaders? They've been really interested in calling attention to this and seeing where they can support, and having more students maybe who come into kindergarten knowing their letters, understanding that phonemic segmentation a little bit can support your teachers in doing that work that they're doing so well. So just wanted to bring all of that to your attention, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, we'll open it up to the committee. Any comments, questions from Ms. Townsend or Dr. Brumley?
So if you're removing the kindergarten screener, then when would the 2 other screeners be administered?
So those will still happen at the beginning of the year, and what we're really doing is we're saying that the kindergarten screener is the literacy screener, the numeracy screener. That screening for literacy and numeracy constitutes that beginning of kindergarten readiness assessment that we need to do.
Ms. Townsend, in regards to that, especially with the screen at the beginning, middle, and end, I believe, and I'm not a kindergarten teacher, but do they not create the academic support plans after the beginning of the year screener? Would it not make sense, these are kindergarten students, right, to allow for that academic support plan to be made after the middle of the year screener instead of the beginning, to save time for those teachers from that standpoint?
I'm really glad that you brought up that plan. So if you remember, that the number of individual plans that we were accumulating was growing, and it got to where you could have 5 different individual plans for one student. And it sounded like there was some work being done that was maybe redundant, causing just extra paperwork without cause necessarily. So the individual academic support plan is meant to be kind of an umbrella plan, like Legos. If you've got a child who needs some extra reading support, let's put reading in the plan. If they need extra math support, let's put math in the plan. And that individual academic support plan wasn't meant to have to do all of these pages for one student. It just meant whatever components of an individual student plan you needed, the paper was there to hold those building blocks of that plan. So the thought is, at the beginning of the year, students come in on all different levels. I know one challenge for me was always figuring out, are all the kids ready for lesson 1 on day 1? If they're not, what do I need to do to catch them up so they can access that instruction? And getting that beginning of the year information is so important, just to see where do I need to customize and differentiate. And so it really is important to get that diagnostic almost at the beginning of the year. Where are we? Where do we need to start from? How do I need to plan for instruction, assuming that all my students aren't ready for lesson 1, day 1, and how can we get them caught up so they can access that as quickly as possible?
Yeah, and I'm not discrediting, of course, we need the screen. I mean, that determines what support you have for those students, but it's the actual making the plan right off the bat, right after the first
Yeah,
school
I
year.
understand. You're talking about should that particular process be delayed until maybe mid-year?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that's something that we can have further discussion around. Happy to engage in that, pulling Dr. Chess on it, and we'll have some conversations about that. That's a reasonable question to ask.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And the plan starts next school year?
Yes.
And you'll have, and it's all the schools, you'll provide all that information?
So the literacy screener will be the DIBEL, so the same one that we've already have in place, and then more information will come out soon about numeracy. The first official year numeracy has to be in place is 26, 27. And then we'll have more information coming out about it pretty soon.
But I think we talked about at our next SAC meeting, introducing more information around the numeracy screener to get out in front of that as early as we can, like we did the literacy.
Okay, any other comments from superintendents? Okay, do we have any public comment? For public comment, I just want to commend the department for looking at this, because the DRDPK screener really wasn't used in a way that was really facilitating to be growth for kindergarten. So I commend you guys for doing that, so appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and likewise, I think that the information, no, I don't think I know. I know the information you guys are gathering from the students through their literacy screeners. I am seeing your teachers engage with that and make instructional decisions. So that's working.
So is there a wish by the committee to possibly endorse this particular item changes to bulletin? An endorsement by Mr. Burton.
Second.
The second by Mr. Burton. All in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion is endorsed by the Superintendent's Advisory Council. Okay, next agenda item, Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook. Oh, sorry. Consideration of an update regarding the Court's Choice program. Can I entertain a motion to receive the presentation? Mr. Powell?
Second.
Second by Ms. Dr. Walker. All in favor? Well, no, it just receives. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I think this was Senator Rick Edmonds' bill from last legislative session that was passed. and it made some shifts, did some adjustments, and some additional allowables under the course choice model. So Dr. Singleton is going to give some updates on this.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is actually the legislation that was put in place as a result of Rick Edmonds' bill. It was updated July 1, 2025, so we're going to just kind of go through those policy updates as it appears in the new bulletin. So Act 91 of the 2024 legislative session provided updates to the course choice program. Those changes in policy included school system responsibilities and parental choice enhancements. Funding priorities have been updated, ensuring access to TOPS-aligned coursework, fast-forward pathways, high-quality career and technical education, academic recovery, and test preparation. The statute also included opportunities for parents to have more choice with regards to coursework being provided to their students in course choice. As a result, there were some key school system responsibilities and some key parental enhancements. First off, the policy includes updates requiring written permission from parents or guardians to enroll students in a course. While obtaining that written permission, this is also a time for the school to ensure the courses that are being selected are academically appropriate and based on the academic and career goals of the student. School systems are also required to inform parents of the opportunity to utilize course choice and their right to select a course provider. Finally, school systems should provide guidance to help parents and guardians understand which courses align to the academic and career goals of the student to ensure an on-time graduation. There were also some parental enhancements included in the policy, and a lot of these are kind of repeated in the fact that parents are to be consulted when it comes time for a student to be enrolled in a course. We should be providing a detailed description of course choice so that parents understand the funding prioritization. Parents should be involved in the selection of courses, and they should be a key component of the decision-making process. And finally, the funding prioritization. So this takes into account the agency goals, ensuring students participating in course choice coursework are exiting high school with coursework that meets their academic and/or career goals. So first off, courses should be offered to students who are seniors who require a TOPS-aligned course to graduate, or coursework that is not readily available at the school. Then students in need of required coursework to complete an associate degree in a fast-forward pathway or a certificate of technical studies aligned to high-wage, high-demand jobs or work-based learning. Students needing access to TOPS-aligned course credit. Students at a CRR or UIRA school, providing access to high-quality academic content aligned to graduation requirements, or high-quality career and technical content aligned to Louisiana IBC state focus lists, which can also be offered as recovery credit. Access to coursework to increase success on nationally recognized assessments, ACT, SAT, CLT, or PEACE, or ASVAB. And finally, other priorities as designated by the local school system, approved by LDOE, and included in the locally adopted pupil progression plan prior to the enrollment process. All of this information was actually released today as the bulletin came out with notice of intent today. So we have updated our website, so you can see all of this information on the website. We have resources for parents and school systems so that you all can see all of this information. We'll have a couple of webinars coming up. A press release will be released in the next couple of days as well. At our CWA and Jumpstart, a Fast Forward convention, we'll have a session there. We'll have sessions at Teacher Leaders Summit. So there are a lot of resources that are available to you all at the school system level, as well as information that you can share with parents regarding the updates to this particular program.
Okay, any questions or comments by the committee? Council? Okay, no. Oh, Dr. Gray.
I'm trying to understand. So I'm looking at with the enrollment priorities are, and it seems like that's what we all do on a regular basis. I'm not understanding why the need for this, if this is something that's already in place. Or am I just taking for granted that everybody does not do this?
Well, some school systems do utilize the funding for test prep more so than focus on coursework that's aligned to what the student needs to graduate or meet tops. So this just allows, it's more explicit for our school systems to know how we want them to utilize this particular funding for those students, and it also gives the choice for parents to make sure that they're involved.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the provider piece? And so if we have course choice and we have, these are our options, and we get with the parent says, I don't want you to be the provider of that particular course. Am I to interpret this that they have an option to provide someone else to offer that course?
So we do have some course providers that have already been approved by the departments. And so because one key component is the parent permission, as well as we have to make sure that the coursework is academically appropriate for the student. So if the school determines that a student should not be enrolled in German 2 because they took Spanish 1, then the school system can deny that particular enrollment because it's not meeting the needs of the student. And so they should only be enrolled in the approved course providers that we have. So if it's a course provider that's not in the approved list, that's not something that the parent can demand that you all enroll them in through course choice.
And I think last year when this bill was being heard in committee, I think the association's position, I don't want to speak for Mr. Falk, he's here, but it was making sure that the school counselor and the system had the ability to navigate that with the parent and make sure that the choice was aligned with the pathway. I think that's accurate.
Just again, forgive my ignorance. So if there's a conflict between what the parent wants versus what we recommend, who wins?
Nobody wins.
Well, then nobody wins, that means both parties loses, so something is going to have to bend at some particular point. I think the point I'm trying to get to, the reason why I'm asking for this clarification, because we are the professional experts when it comes to trying to guide kids into that particular direction, and I think that parents do have the ability to weigh in on those particular options. But just what if the parents' understanding of what it is not what's best for the child, and we have a little bit more evidence that can support that particular position? That's why I asked who wins. If we don't find that, then we can really get to a point where we'll have a stalemate between the school and the parent. So I'm just trying to figure out what happens when that happens, because it's going to happen. I just want to understand.
Yeah, absolutely understand. So you're going to want to look at 3 key things as you navigate through that discussion. You're going to want to look at course misalignment. Is this a course that is aligned to the student's established GPA? Right? I'm sorry, IGP. So that's the first, and so that those IGP discussions become very important when thinking about it through this lens. So one, it's going to be the misalignment. So if the parent wants something for the student that isn't aligned to their goals, that's where that discussion happens. The next will be academic appropriateness. In thinking through like dual enrollment, does that student meet the prerequisites? Do they have the qualifying scores on tests to do that? So that'll be the second area. And then the third is going to be the prioritization, right? So if you're expending all your funds within priority number 1 and 2, and as a parent is trying to gain access through priority 6, you've expended your funds through those top 2 priorities, and your funds will be expended by the time you're able to get to priority 6. So that's kind of how you can navigate through those 3 lenses, the discussions with the parents.
So if I can make a comparison, we can use this as like kind of the SLT process for teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever has the preponderance of evidence wins that argument. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know.
I mean, I would also use this as an opportunity with parents to draw them into the system even more and further engage them, which I think would be a positive.
So and I think that you're 100% correct in that regard, and it does gives us a new avenue to engage parents in conversations about what their kids need, and almost forces them to engage a little bit more. It's going to be the 5% that's going to come in, and all I'm trying to do is just accommodate to whereas we have a process in place to whereas, and even though it's only the 5% that creates the majority of the problem, they can come in there a whole lot of time. And so the better we understand this process and what our safeguards are, we can keep that to a minimum to where the 5% takes up only 5% of the time. So I just want to make that clear.
And we can look between here and Bessie, and we can get Ms. Townsend to look from a policy perspective and see, do we need to add any clarifying language?
Sure. Love that.
Okay, any other comments from council? No public comments, so we will move to the next agenda. Thank you, Dr. Smith. 3.3, consideration of an update regarding third grade retention and promotion. Can I entertain a motion to receive the update? Dr. Conlon. Second by Ms. Walker. Dr. Cronin.
Yes, sir. So, we just are continuing just to provide attention and highlight this particular piece of legislation that passed a couple of years ago, because this is going to be the first cohort where this hits. And so we just want to make sure that everybody's at a good place in terms of implementation of the law, see if there are any additional supports you need, see if there are any communication templates that you need. So we just want to use this opportunity once again for you all, but also for the general public, to highlight the third grade promotion law and all the different elements that go into that. So Dr. Chasson will make that report.
Thank you, Dr. Berman. Good afternoon, everyone. So just a few reminders about the third grade retention policy that does go into effect for this year's current third graders. Just wanted to remind you all that there is that list in the policy, that pretty long list of good cause exemptions. So I think that's really important to be paying attention to right now. Make sure that your team really understands, your school leaders really understands what those good cause exemptions are, what they look like. Those are things like English learners who have been in our country less than 2 years, students with a diagnosis of dyslexia, students who have an IEP with previous retention, or they have an IEP and the screener is deemed to not be appropriate as an assessment for them. If a student has received 2 years of documented intensive intervention, if they score elite mastery in ELA in third grade, or if they were retained previously. So those are all the good cause exemptions that are listed out in that policy. So just to make sure that everyone on your team has a good understanding of those as you move forward through the next few months and navigate this new policy. But it does prohibit the promotion to fourth grade of certain students who are falling well below on the screener, at that lowest level on the screener for end of year. And just a reminder, you all should have received an updated calendar for that screener, that it'll take place before the end of the year, then right at the end of the year, and then once more in the summer months. So there are 3 windows for that screening. Those students will receive 3 opportunities to repeat the end of year third grade screener to try to advance their score as you all work to provide interventions in between each screener administration. So just a few thoughts on what happens between now and that point. You all have your middle of the year data, so you know who these kids are. You have a number right now in your system. So as I've been traveling the state and talking to superintendents, that's been my question, is how many of your third graders were well below on middle of the year? What's your plan for them right now in the spring? What's your plan after you take that end of year first administration as you identify those students? I think it's also really important to keep an eye on students who are in that below achievement range as well, to ensure that they don't slip into the well below by the end of the year, especially if these are students that you have your eye on maybe because of attendance, maybe for things like behavior, they're missing class at times. So those are things to just really keep an eye on for those kids who are both in the below and the well below. Ensure that progress monitoring is happening weekly is our literacy team's recommendation in class, that they're doing that progress monitoring every week for those well below students and perhaps the below as well, or at least a portion of them. Verify that all of your families have received middle-of-year reports and communication. That is in the policy, and especially important for these students who are falling into the well below category, that you're ensuring that those daily targeted small group interventions are happening. And maybe take a look at what remaining funds you have. We've actually, had conversations with a few school systems who say, I have money left, what happens with it? Spend it on tutoring, please spend it on tutoring. Spend it on tutoring these students who are in that well below category. And then prepare for what your summer learning opportunities can look like for these students, what's going to happen in April after you give that end of year, and then May before you send them out the door, and then what happens to the ones that you call back in the summer before that third administration. And that concludes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
For the council. Board.
I'm going to ask again, we talked about this and corresponded for one of the provisions in 1724-11, C1E, is a Bessie-approved alternate assessment. For the purpose of this, I received an email that week was that. I haven't seen where Bessie has approved that to be the alternate screener. Nor do I think it's appropriate, as it's a standardized criterion referenced assessment that is not correlated or aligned in any way to a reading assessment for the purpose that Dibbles is used for.
Louis, we have no different response to you today, Dr. Brown. That is the alternate assessment that we have right now. I'm happy to have further conversation with Bessie and see if they want to add an additional alternate assessment. But, we have not had a desire to add an additional alternate assessment. We believe that this process meets the definition of the law. But I understand that you do not, and you have been very clear about that.
Well, the clock is ticking on this, and we've got a group of kids that are going to be the ones that are going to be subject to the ramifications behind it. And the first time I asked this question was at the Teacher Leader Summit in May of last year, which is knocking on a year with this now. The law requires Bessie to approve an alternate assessment. I don't think they've done that. At least I've never seen it on any agenda where it's even been addressed. Dibbles, at the end of third grade, is going to give us a number of oral reading fluency and takes no consideration at all into comprehension. Dibbles has an assessment that's called Maze that does take comprehension into consideration. If you've got a kid that is 2 or 3 words a minute, lower than what that number is, that's the magic number, they could be reading at a 98% comprehension level. And then we're going to have them repeat the third grade. I'm asking again that be considered, because that is a reality for kids. And although the idea behind this statute is to ensure that kids are reading on level before they hit the 4th grade, we all know what the ramifications can be for third graders who don't. There's also statistics regarding dropout rates for kids who are retained at those young ages. And if we're going to implement this type of system, we need to have a safeguard in place for kids who don't fall into all of those other categories where they have to have a label attached to them, and take comprehension into consideration, and not just the number of words that they can pronounce in a set amount of time of 60 seconds or 90 seconds or whatever that magic number of seconds may be. There's a lot of kids that's going to pass that can pronounce words at a rate that they've been practicing pretty much now since 1st grade, but yet the comprehension may not be there. But kids who are comprehending, that's not meeting that magic speed, they're gonna end up being retained.
Well, I think that's where the alternate of if the student is successful on LEAP, then that advances them into the fourth grade.
I'm just gonna say for the last time, it's not apples to apples with those two assessments. And if LEAP was meant to be that, then it should be given dibbles for this purpose, then LEAP should determine whether or not to move on to the next grade level.
It's not apples to apples. If it were apples to apples, there would be no need for an alternate test because you already have the apples. So, I mean, that is the way in which we have decided to progress through this. I'm happy to have additional conversation with Bessie. I will absolutely do that to see if they want to identify an additional test. But that's just where we are at this point.
Okay, so I have a couple, I am not an expert on dibbles, and this really came up yesterday in our principals meeting, so I'll stammer through this. I understand it enough, but I just want to make sure. Part of the challenge is, I mean, everybody probably understands, I mean, I know y'all do, but, so it's basically 3 tests that are a minute timed, and then there's a 3-minute maze test. And right now, we have 59 students in our 3rd grade who are showing well below, but they have A's, B's, or C's, averages, common assessments, a high-quality instructional, materials, good teachers. And they are not going to hit any of these options. There's so much discrepancy in this. When you look on the Dibbles website, it says that, it says no test is ever 100% reliable and accurate, and moreover, no single test should drive high-stakes decisions. It certainly should be a part of the decision. I don't think anybody argues that, but we're getting into a position where, just for instance, I'll give you an example with our EL students. They have an accommodation for an extra minute. And so those kids are scoring at benchmark or higher because of the 1 minute on these nonsense words. What happens is these kids with comprehension, who do comprehend, they struggle on the nonsense words. And so yesterday we're having a discussion with my principal. She says, okay, so for the next month, do we take 30 minutes away from ELA instruction to teach these kids how to take this test and not worry about the LEAP? And I'll go back, Dr. Shashan and them have done an awesome job with the regional deals. That has been great for us. And the coherence piece for us as a district is critical, and that's something we're going to really be focusing on. The coherence piece, this does not fit the coherence piece of what we're talking about. I know it was the law, and we have to follow it. LEAP is very different from Dibbles. So it's causing confusion for the principals. I'm not complaining. We need help on this. And there's a disconnect for the teachers in terms of how to prepare them for Dibbles, how to prepare for LEAP. What do we want to prepare them for? Obviously to do well on both of them, but we're just asking for help. We have 59 kids who fit in this role, and I do hope that they'll score Master Advance on LEAP and be able to be promoted. But shouldn't this be a data point, this very short, small snippet of the year when they're getting all of this, they have the high quality instructional materials and these teachers, and we're doing high dosage tutoring. The question is, for these 59 kids, we need to start teaching them to take this Dibbles test to pass to 4th grade, and then whatever happens on LEAP happens. That's the challenge that we're facing. I'm not complaining. I'm asking for what do I tell my principal and what do I tell my teachers in this situation?
But yeah, I think first of all, nonsense words are about decoding. So I am not a reading specialist, but I think that if students can't decode, then yes, it's worth, tutoring or other intervention type opportunities to teach them how to decode. So I would not suggest there is a problem if you are providing additional time to help students understand how to decode.
I don't think it's that simple explaining it like that, but I'm not a reading instructor. I'm not I can't, I'm not going to debate on what they should or shouldn't do because I don't know the answers to that. It's just the coherence piece. We talk about coherence in our district. These tests are not coherent. It is not, these 3rd graders are already, they test to the hilt. I know y'all know that, and that's something we're working on. But we're trying to, we're working hard, pushing these kids, trying to do our very best to prepare them, not for the leap, but to do well in the leap. This is throwing a wrench in there. We already have those students we're working on. We have awesome teachers. We're working hard. We're going to continue to do it. The question is, I guess we need to adjust our tact on this thing to make sure that we don't have 59, solid kids who are retained. Maybe they won't make a master's. Maybe they make a basic on the ELA. Should they be retained though in that regard? That's the question.
Well, number one, not a person in this room authored the bill, not a person in this room voted on the bill, and none of us signed it. That worked its way through the legislative process, and for that specific reason. Some people will say, well, it should have been first grade, not third grade. That was a debate that happened, both publicly and privately. Some people say, well, it should have been LEAP, not the screener. That was a debate that happened both publicly and privately. I had thoughts around all of those things, and some of those suggestions were considered and others were not. But this is the way in which the sausage was made, and this is where it landed. I am not in favor of continuing a process of socially promoting children who aren't ready for what's next. And I'm not suggesting you are either. I know you well enough to believe that to be true. And whatever supports, additional supports you need from us, let us know. We want to be helpful. We'll come to the system. Whatever additional resources you want us to help develop, we'll be there. But this is the reason why we've had this conversation for 2 or 3 years now, because this is going to be the first year of impact for this particular group of students. I could not have supported it all several years ago, saying we're going to have a policy or a law that prevents children from promoting. But I know what you're doing now in K3, and K3 looks very different today than it looked 5 years ago. And so I don't have the hesitations that I would have had 5 years ago because of what I'm seeing you doing in your schools. So is it that easy if it's a decoding issue and we need to work on that? I don't know. I'm not going to argue that with you. But if it is about decoding, I would suggest, yeah, we need to spend time on it.
Can I add this too? I think with the science of reading instruction going in, I do think we're going to see an improvement in this area. These third graders, they're on the cusp of the full integration of the science of reading. There is a disconnect on this, and I'm not going to ask y'all. I mean, can you sit there and say, I'm not going to ask you this, but I'd love to say, can you sit there and say this is best for kids? Again, with the system coherence, everything, all of our vision should be built around student growth. What the student instruction, how they're growing. This feels like this is not coherent in terms of what are we doing, what are we trying to do. There's just this disconnect between.
What are you suggesting is not coherent?
When you look at what students are tested on with the LEAP versus DIBELS, they're different. They're assessing different pieces. I mean, even when you look at the maze, and my teachers, my principals, again, I couldn't tell you what the maze looked like if you put it here in front of me. But my understanding is it's a weird sort of comprehension. It's different than other styles of doing it. We need coherence and testing and everything across the board. I know that's a big picture. I know those are things y'all are working on. And I know y'all didn't pass the bill, all these things, but we're in the position, and it's fine. We'll figure it out. We'll pull from here and put there. Whatever we have to do. But again, let's create the best thing for our kids. And I know we're moving there. I know we're trying to do that. But this is frustrating to the principals and teachers. That's why I'm bringing it.
I feel better after hearing you articulate it that way, because that's just a function of the way in which the law was written. That's not something that the Literacy Here team did or anything. It is the screener for the DIBELS screener is not the LEAP test. They are not the same thing. And there were discussions legislatively about why is it going to be the screener? Why would it just not be the LEAP test? Those discussions happen. At the end of the day, this is where it landed. And so that's why I'm saying whatever we can do to help with the instructional supports or PD that you need, let us know. But I can't go and say, well, we're not going to do this anymore. it's a law. And frankly, I think it's a good one, because I think that we have passed students on for too long that haven't been ready to access properly grade level content in 4th grade. And we've done a disservice to kids by passing them along. And so whatever we can do to further refine and make it better, we want to do.
So kind of a combination of what Dr. Law and Dr. Hunter said. I think one of our concerns that we've had in Refuge Spears, and Dr. Chasson, most members of my team have reached out to you, we've had this conversation. Has there been a study of how many of the students who performed well below on the screener at the end of last year, but then when we got the LEAP results, they scored mastery? I know we had that in our area with a number of students, and we forced all these students to go to summer school to get their LEAP results, a few weeks later and say, not bad, because of the screener that we used. I mean, not that summer school's bad for anybody. I mean, they sure benefited from it. But I think just because it's written in the law the way it is right now doesn't mean we can't bring some potential revisions to it. So, I think if we all have enough good information about what the impact is having versus what the actual impact is having versus the intended impact, because philosophically I think we're all on the same page, but we don't need to be socially promoting students who don't know how to read. We're all there, but to Dr. Fountain's point, the coherence between the actual practice it's a valid point. And so has anybody run that type of report that you're aware of, Dr. Chasson, or is that something that we could request?
Yeah, I don't have that information in front of me, Superintendent, but I do want to just clarify and then affirm a few things, Superintendent Fountain. What DIPLS is meant to screen for. It is meant to screen and indicate if a student is at risk for reading difficulties as they progress through the remainder of their school life. So it is supposed to be an indication of there is a high risk, and especially when you get to that well below category. Well below is low. That cut score is very low if you take a look across the battery of the screener. And so it sends up this red flag that this student is certainly at a high risk for having reading difficulties throughout their educational journey. And so I wanted to clarify that about DIPLS, but I also wanted to affirm, Superintendent Fountain, 2 things that you said. One is that you said 59 students. You know your number. And that I think is so important to begin with, that to have system leaders and school leaders knowing right now at this point in the school year, we know who these students are. We know what kind of focus and attention we need to give them. And I think that's a part of the policy to begin with before you even get to the retention phase. That is what was meant to drive in this policy, was to give these children just this special attention that they need before they matriculate into 4th grade. And so I think knowing them, you also talked about changing the schedule. I wouldn't recommend pulling them out of any core instruction, but I absolutely recommend get creative. This is the time, if you have those students who scored well below in the middle of the year, absolutely take a look at those student schedules and say, how can we just squeeze every minute of instructional time out of their day to do anything we can to make sure that we get these kids on track before they take their end of year. So I think that's a great idea. I would not steal from any core time, especially not ELA core time, but I would be looking at each student's schedule and saying, what can I do for these kids? How can I prioritize them between now and the end of year administration? So I just wanted to affirm some of those things that you said, because I think they were really strong.
And Jenna's been quizzing superintendents on our road trip about how many kids they have well below. So you passed. I don't think you'll have 59 at EOI.
I agree, but I don't know what we'll give for that. That's my point. 3rd grade is nuts. And everybody knows that in terms of their testing. And it's so much, and the principals and the teachers, that's when you feel their angst and just sort of the overwhelm on that. That's the hard part for us. And I want to let the teachers teach and do all those things, and I feel like some of these things add, just to heighten stress. Teaching's a great job. It's a challenging job. We know it. We will. We'll figure this out. But I'm just passing on what I'm hearing from people.
And I'd just like to share. Representative Wildman Van Burn held their K-12 education task force. Some of the same discussions came up then, and I know from their report that was given last week, they're very interested in obviously collaborating with with Bessie and the State Department to overcome some of those concerns that they have reported on. This was one of the points of discussion, so I know our organization looks forward to continuing those discussions on some minor tweaks or where the challenges may rest from that standpoint. The other point I'd like to make is I was provided a letter from Superintendent Williams of Vernon Parish that he just wanted me to read for the sake of the department and Bessie, just relative to his student enrollment. His student enrollment obviously is a high percentage of military students, so when in consideration of the good cause exemption, I know Dr. Chesson, you were speaking of, I'm not as familiar with this, but out of respect for him and him setting this to be part of this meeting, I'd just like to read part of it. The 2024-25 Vernon Parish enrollment includes 21% of K-12 military students. It's 1,500 students. The total military enrollment pre-K-4 population is 23%. These students come from all over the world and have been taught by different curriculum approaches, and in many cases come with not only a disadvantage in reading, but also in linguistics and language deficits. Given these considerations, we assert that it's in the best interest of students of military families for our Louisiana Elementary and Secondary Board of Education to expedite a waiver of grade 3 good cause exemptions for this particular school year, 24-25 school year. On behalf of Vernon Parish students and families, thank you for considering the request. And I'll just submit this, Dr. Bowman, I guess, to yourself or maybe Mr. Walker, just for consideration.
I just have a hard time believing that 2/3 of Louisiana kids are not reading proficiently, you know, and I just have a hard time believing that the students that have been discussed here in the well below category at scale are proficient readers. I'm not saying you said that, but when 2/3 of the kids are not proficient readers in the state of Louisiana in 4th grade or 8th grade, it's hard for me to register that, well, those kids on Dibbles that are well below in 3rd grade, they're really pretty good readers. You know, it doesn't make sense to me. So I understand the frustration that there's a lot to do in a classroom, and I think we ought to be doing more to help teachers. And I understand that, you know, this test is not that test, but I just don't know that I have that level of concern that we're going to misidentify mass numbers of children that are actually proficient readers because they're well below on the Dibble screener. So I just struggle with that. Let's have more conversation with that later. Really am interested in that conversation.
And I think I would like to add to Mr. Morton. I don't think that's what probably Dr. Vorlon or Dr. Fallon was saying. Probably.
No, I know that's not what Dr. Vorlon said. Yeah.
But, you know, when you look at other metrics, and every test is different, tests obviously different skills. When you think about the NAEP, right, that we're so high on for our 4th grade readers, you're right, 75% of them can, right? We're making such achievements in those areas, and that test not just fluency, but comprehension as well. I can't compare the two tests. Obviously, we don't know all the students that were tested, but I think that within itself brings up a very valid point of where we're growing as a state relative to 4th grade reading, but we're applying one metric for promotion. I agree with the content, but I think there are other, for one student to remain back, that's a big load to carry for some families when they feel their child, and maybe the school does as well, based on the comprehension, not just the speed and fluency. And just in general, and I'll turn it over to.
Well, that's the psychological point that was raised around, should it be 1st grade or should it be 3rd grade, you know?
Agree, because I said 1st grade.
I have my thoughts around that too.
Smart.
Yes, definitely first. So, different topic, same genre. We're approaching this by using a lot of high-dosage tutoring, and we've seen a lot of success with high-dosage tutoring. The ask for me of Bessie is if Bessie could petition the state legislative body to free up retired teachers to earn a greater percentage of their retirement income with providing high-dosage tutoring. My best tutors have been retired educators who won't be eligible to be hired at all next school year because we actually maximize their earnings potential in year 24 and already in year 25 when the school year ends. I'm looking at Dr. Chasson because one of these services, the school that her kids attend, and this is a challenge that's just an arbitrary roadblock that we've built for ourselves. So if we can petition the legislative body to free up and recognize that people providing high dosage tutoring are really not that different than teachers of critical shortage need, and freeing that up would be a big savings for us.
We will, we'll pass it on to the legislative committee of this.
And I'd just like to add to that, is that really helps with some of the challenges associated with high dosage tutoring the vendors, right? Some of the challenges associated with that. Our teachers, our retired teachers know our systems, know our kids' processes, so totally agree with this one. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other comment from the council? Is there any public comment? Okay, that moves us to our next agenda item, 3.4, consideration of an update report regarding tutoring data collection, reporting, and on-site monitoring. Can I get a motion to receive? Dr. Gray, second. Dr. Joseph, all in favor, aye? Aye. Dr.
Yeah, so good news here. We just watched the governor's executive budget presentation for the upcoming year. And as a opening bid in the governor's budget, I want to thank Dr. Saber-Kingham, who is here representing the governor. In that opening bid, there is the $30 million included for the high dosage tutoring again. So we're really thankful to see that in there. So that's really good news. And at this point, Dr. Chasson, I don't know, you want to give a report on where we are with this right now, and talk about, too, some of the changes we're making to consolidate plans and put kids in a position where they can begin tutoring services earlier next year. I know that because it was a brand new law and there was stuff to sort out, some places didn't get started until November, December, some even after the turn of the year, I think. But our goal this year is to be able to start earlier, because I know like how critical in a school August, September, and October are academically. So we want to make sure that we're able to have plans in place earlier and also consolidated plans so they're not multiple plans.
So just a few notes as we close out this year of tutoring. There is a good bit of data to be collected according to the legislation. If y'all have actually read through the high dosage tutoring legislation, it's not just a one-pager, it's quite a few pages, and there's a good portion of that talks about the data and the reporting that we are responsible for, and so in return that we need to collect from you all. So that'll be done in a few different ways, but one way is through some fiscal reporting that we are requesting through EGMS, and so we're doing this on a quarterly basis. So we're currently in the Q1 and Q2 reporting cycle. You're reporting to us any tutoring that you pay for August through December right now through EGMS, and then you will subsequently report for Q3 and Q4. And just a reminder that the funds for the high dosage tutoring allocation can only be used for two expenses: salary and benefits for full or part-time LEA staff, or for you to contract with an external tutoring provider who appears on our department's vendor guide. So thank you all for that fiscal reporting. I think it's going to be really important as we head into session, just for us to be able to demonstrate that we have a high level of confidence that this money has been spent, first of all, and that it will be spent by the end of the fiscal year, to show that, you know, every dollar of that $30 million appropriation is needed for tutoring, but then also that there's a high level of confidence that the money went where it needed to go through this reporting. So I thank everyone for contributing to that reporting. I think it's going to be very important as we enter legislative session, and there's a lot of discussion about the executive budget and that $30 million remaining.
And you guys have done so well on this. I mean, we've been out there and we've seen it, and it's really fun to watch. And I know you've had to struggle with which vendors here, which one's good, and this vendor hadn't performed, and this one did. And that'll all be better next year because of your experiences. But y'all done so well with this, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, we've been in over 35 school systems specifically for high dosage tutoring, on-site monitoring, which has been fantastic. It really has been a joy to see the high quality of this the tutoring programs that you've been able to stand up over this year. So I want to just encourage you all, we're going to continue to do that on-site monitoring over the next coming months through the end of the year, so we'll reach out to you if we're looking to do that in your system. But I want to encourage all of you to have your teams use this self-assessment checklist. I think it's really a helpful tool that all of you can use with your teams to go out and assess the quality of your tutoring programs. And now is a great time to do this. Do this prior to testing. When your school's kind of getting to that testing mode, when you're still doing a lot of tutoring, now is a great time to go out and use the self-assessment checklist, really monitor the quality of what's happening. This is a lot of money and a lot of time and effort that we have spent this year on tutoring, and all of you have spent this year on tutoring. And so make sure that it's worth it, that what's happening during that high dosage tutoring time is really high quality and gonna have an important impact on student learning. So use that checklist, and then as you do that, audit your current tutoring programs and think, what changes do we need to see for next year? Are there some things that we want to do differently? Is there a different vendor that we want to contract with? Is there a different way that we need to use our current staff or retired staff? So now's a great time to be thinking about all of that. One last piece of reporting here is that by the end of this year, and we've been communicating this with your data managers, another really important piece of the reporting that we are responsible for to the legislature is attendance data for tutoring. So we've communicated this with data managers, but this will be done through EdLink. So there's the fiscal reporting that will be done through EGMS, and then the attendance reporting that is upcoming in EdLink 360. So I just wanted to call your attention to that as well, but your data managers have received that communication. And finally, Dr. Brumley spoke earlier about how we are pushing up the timeline for planning. So over the next few months, you will be asked to plan during this spring semester for next year's tutoring implementation. We will ask you to use your numbers from this year's data as a projection, and then at the beginning of next year, we'll ask you to update your numbers and your data in EGMS, but we'll ask you to use this year's data as a projection and really think through, how can I strengthen my tutoring programs for next year? What will this look like in our schools? So I want to just encourage you all to get out in your schools and see the tutoring right now, see what's working, what's not, and then build strong plans moving into next year. We've also had a few school systems mention to us, reach out to us, let us know that whether they are really satisfied with a vendor on the vendor guide or maybe not so much. So we'd love to hear from you about the vendors. If there's someone you're really happy with for a particular reason, you think they're doing a really good job in a certain area, let us know. And then similarly, let us know if there are vendors who you have some concerns about or who haven't upheld their end of the contract for you that you've maybe had difficulties with. We want to make sure that that vendor guide is very accurate. And it is supposed to be a high-quality tutoring vendor guide. We want to make sure that it stays that way. And, we selected these vendors through an RFA process. And at the end of the day, an RFA process is on paper. And you've now experienced those tutoring providers in real life, which is very different from what they can submit to us on paper. So we want to know your concerns and your experiences about those vendors as we move forward. So you can always feel free to send that to me or to send that to our tutoring inbox, tutoring@la.gov. And that concludes this update. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, council, are there any questions? Dr. Chesson, yes, sir, go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry, Mr. Sheldon.
I'm aware that the LD is doing some monitoring of the tutoring processes that are happening in our school systems. I know it might be early on, but have you been able to glean any findings from the monitoring at this point?
We have. I think for the most part, we're seeing some really strong implementation. We've still seen some spots where some schools are struggling some with scheduling, and maybe they're dipping into core time a little more than we would like to see. Students are missing out maybe on some science and social studies to receive some ELA and or math tutoring. So we've seen some of that we've tried to support in adjusting schedules. But really, I'll say these are on-site monitoring visits. but we also consider them support visits. We've trained our team on how to conduct these, and it's not just about going in and checking boxes, but also having these debrief conversations where we're able to talk with you about strengthening your plans. I think for the most part, we've seen a lot of really good materials being used. We see people really sticking to the materials that are in your plans, that are outlined in the template, that we've encouraged you all to use. So I think materials-wise, for the most part, we've seen people using really good materials during tutoring. At times, I think a missing piece sometimes that we've seen has been that lack of coherence. Superintendent Fountain, maybe sometimes the tutors not talking enough with the core instructors. But for the most part, we've seen really, really good quality implementation and really smaller pieces that can be strengthened over time for more impact.
We'll share with you that your people in the field, the network team, are reaching out directly to superintendents like myself, and they're giving us updates on what's happening. So as more data is collected, we really look forward to having more conversations on that. It's been very helpful.
Any other council comment? I'd just like to add before we open up to public comment, kind of to Mr. Jones's question, I was going to ask this question is, what do you see as the biggest challenge? It sounds like the scheduling is one. From 35 school systems, what are some of the other challenges? So some internal challenges we've had is with the number of students per group. I don't know if that's come up. And is there any appetite to possibly work with the legislators because we have to change there from that standpoint? Anything else you want to add as far as the challenges go?
She mentioned scheduling, which I think is, I think it's being sorted out, but probably there are places where that's still a challenge. The other thing is just finding, if you're not using your own staff, finding the vendor that fits for you and your kids, because, you know, we'll have a conversation, it happened just last week, we'll have a conversation with someone and they'll share that so-and-so vendor is fantastic. It's the best vendor they've ever seen. And then we'll go, 50 miles down the road and they'll say, so-and-so vendor's awful. And it's the same one. And I'm like, how can this be true? But it's just a matter of finding people that work best for you. So I would say scheduling and then the vendor. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, I'm just finding the tutors. And I think Superintendent Martin raised a question that we've received a few times already, that we've had some internal conversations about, because that's absolutely a challenge that we've heard is either you as an LEA or the tutoring vendor trying to utilize retired educators and coming up with a barrier there with retirement.
One other somewhat related item I want to share with you all, because I think it relates to tutoring, with the revised accountability model, with the section on the growth with the bottom 25%, you're going to see obviously overlap there with tutoring, but one of the things I want to mention is what our intent is for July to be able to provide you the actual listing of students that would apply for the upcoming school year. So in fact, we want to give you a buffer. So we're looking at probably giving you the bottom 30% of achievers as opposed to the 25. And so before you even go into the year, you know the names of those children, you know the names of the ones that you have to move, both because it's the right thing to do, but also because of the accountability impact. So just know that's what we're shooting for, July, and we're trying to give you the 30%.
And I'll be back on again.
Yes, for the all the grades that are assessed. Yeah.
I was just going to add on talking about all the coherence piece. We had a great presentation from the SPED department yesterday about playbook. Awesome presentation, they did a great job. But there's some incoherent issues in terms of like when you look at tutoring sizes, because in the playbook it says that a quality instructor, a 5-to-1 ratio is as good. I mean, the research shows that that's as good as a 1-to-1 potentially. And then there's other things about group sizes. So I would say again, maybe it would be worth just looking at the the group sizes in terms of what is best for kids. And I don't know that there's an arbitrary number that you can settle on. Maybe there's other factors into it, but I think it's worth a conversation around that as well.
Not in terms of alignment. One add, the playbook is a department-generated, developed document, and that number is a legislatively required.
Coherence. I'm just kidding. I'm just going back, I'm telling you, it's changing my world, what we did, but that's all, everything I'm doing now is about our coherence, so.
Well, I'll mention it again, but that K-12 committee, they seem very interested in working with all parties. So to me, these are very simple things that we can work together with for our kids. So I'll say that. And then to Dr. Bromley's point, with the identification of the lowest 25%, that is one of the challenges I think a lot of systems in preparation for next year. So I do appreciate you trying to get that out ahead of time, as well as Dr. Chats on the flexibility with the dates for the end of the year. Digital assessing, that's phenomenal. But I would say that many systems, and I know we're doing it internally in St. Charles, are trying to have some type of, say at some school, whatever, maybe called differently than what we've done in the past, trying to target on those 25%, as well as our EL population. So the earliest we can identify those kids accurately through the accountability measures, the better it is, I think, for everyone. So.
Which data set are you using to identify the lowest performance in the third grade? Are you using a dibble swing? What are you going to use to identify those low kids?
Ash, do you have that information, or we need to follow up with Thomas on that? We'll follow up, yeah. We'll let you know.
Okay, any more comment on the council? Okay, we do have two persons for public comment. We have our Bessie president, Mr. Ronnie Morris. If you come forward, please, sir. And Mr. Michael Falk with the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents will be next, and Mr. Falk, please sit here.
Thank you. So I just wanted to acknowledge the focus on this area. We've all celebrating the wins, but I really appreciate Superintendent Bromley's comment on several occasions now that we're really proud of our progress, but we realize that there's a lot of untapped opportunity out there. So a lot more work to be done, but with the focus that you guys have on this topic, I know we can continue to progress. So I was really encouraged by the focus on where some of those remaining opportunities are, looking at the monitoring and what are we learning from that, and the quality of the monitoring and how we're presenting these tests and so forth. So one thing I didn't hear any discussion on, I'm really interested in. I talked to Representative Weigel yesterday at a different event, and I know he's doing some work on parent engagement. So I haven't heard any discussion on that. I was really interested if the superintendent had any feedback on parent engagement, what efforts they put in that space, what kind of feedback they could offer, and then also from the department, when we expect to hear a report from Representative Weigel's organization on that topic, because I know that's their focus, and then anything that you may have garnered to date on that topic that you could share.
If I could just respond, Ms. Morris, we appreciate that. Perhaps we can have that as an agenda item for the next meeting so that we can maybe gather some parental engagement opportunities that our systems. But no, that obviously is probably the number one challenge we all experience in our systems is the lack of parental engagement. So I know different systems do many things. I just didn't know if you wanted that right now or provide an opportunity. Maybe we could gather some information and bring it back to this committee.
I'm just interested in sharing information where it would be of best use, so whether it's now or as soon as possible. We just like to recognize that as a focus area as well, and what are we doing to engage our parents, what can we do better, and again leverage the learnings throughout the state. Whatever's appropriate.
Our parent engagement task force, I think the next meeting is set for March 24th. Is that? The last one we had to cancel due to 9 inches of snow in that route, but that next one is, I think, March 24th.
Mr. Morgan, I'm happy to share that some of the things that we've done in Rapid Spears, Mr. Morris, is made sure that we've met with every parent, every school has met with every parent to get their signature on the documentation citing the new law, citing that they understand that if my child still scores at this level by the end of the year, this is what will happen, the consequences. But here's what we're doing at the school building level to help close the learning gap, and here's some things that you can do at home to help with that. And so far that seems to be working fairly well. And also we just had our spring parent-teacher conferences where we put a lot more emphasis on, we're tracking our participation in a way like we've never done it before, and have seen an increase from fall to spring on exactly how many parents are actively participating in those conferences. We still have to figure out some good levers for how do you measure engagement and at-home learning exercises with that. But again, maybe to Dr. Chasson's point, one of the things that happens, intended consequences with policy changes and law changes like this, is it's causing us to really reach out in ways and create those partnerships, true partnerships with home, and not just these, one or sometimes two-way communication, but actual partnerships. So it's been good.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I'd just like to share too, obviously there's true engagement and communication. I mean, the communication piece is there on the system's behalf, but the engagement is a little bit more difficult at times. All of us probably have either completed or recently completed parent-teacher conferences. I know we employ a data management system that provides direct text messages to parents. So we've been communicating from that standpoint, as well as parent-teacher conferences, and then really a variety of stakeholder groups that have direct connections to our families. It's another opportunity. Faith-based groups is an avenue that we've taken to reach some of those hard-to-reach families as well. But I would say it still is the biggest challenge is engaging, because we can communicate all we want, but unless they're at the table to truly communicate back and forth is where the biggest challenge is.
Well, thank you for sharing, and I know Bessie's really interested to hear from parents as well. So any feedback that you can share from parents as far as, what's working for them, what additional supports they would request, we'd love to hear about that as well. So thank you.
Mr. Falk?
I just wanted to share that several superintendents have reached out to me, and they're two issues. Number one, the pupil-teacher ratio for some of the smaller outlying districts. It's real hard to get that one teacher, even though it's 4 to 1. It's been a challenge. And then number two, the differences in the online providers. It's a mixed bag. As you mentioned, some districts are very satisfied with one, and it all depends on the person that's providing the tutoring and how they coordinate with the classroom teacher and their background. So we just need to look at that to make sure if we're going to go more to online tutoring because of the personnel issues, that it is something that can be of benefit to students.
Okay, with no further public comment, we'll move to the next agenda item, 3.5, consideration of an update report regarding mobile telecommunications policy. I entertain a motion to proceed.
So moved.
Dr. Joseph first.
Second.
Mr. Joseph second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Dr. Froman.
I'm going to try and handle this one without Ashley having come up. We'll see. So this one is relative to cell phones in schools. Whenever we worked with teachers last year, this was their number one concern, was the distractions that cell phones were causing in classrooms. Quite consistently in conversations with teachers, this was the primary concern that they shared. Legislation passed that prohibited cell phones being on and used during the instructional day. I think it's really good. I'm glad that it happened. I also think that a lot of the pushback that I was anticipating you all facing, you didn't face, because I think you did a really good job of communication with families, which was helpful. But I think the law and/or policy provides that you have to submit to us by March 1st your plan on telecommunication. And so some of the things that have to be included on that are the definition of instructional day, including start and end times. I know some of you are saying like the instructional day is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. period. Some of you are saying instructional day is while the teachers engage in the instruction from that first bell to end bell. So you have your own flexibilities there. How is the policy applicable to school-sponsored events during the instructional day? The means by which a parent can communicate with the student, prohibition of use on school-issued devices for personal social use, and then what are you doing in terms of consequences for individuals that violate the cell phone policy. I hope that this is going well for you all. the superintendent's teacher council that I have on multiple occasions, and they represent 20 different school systems probably. They've been very complimentary of the way that it's going in your systems. But what I try to tell people is, it is state law, and we support it. Bessie supports it. But if you're going to have a prohibition against a cell phone that's going to work, you have to support it, and your principals have to enforce it, because no one in Baton Rouge can come and enforce your cell phone policy for you. So the teachers on my advisory council were very complimentary. They said, kids are talking to each other at lunch. They're not texting each other. One teacher said, I'm having to plan for more content because I'm getting through more content now because of the distractions of the cell phone aren't there. So we're just, I guess, using this particular agenda item as a reminder that you have to submit your policy to us by March the 1st, and also just in terms of best practice, if you have anything you want to share across the group of what's working and what's not working, it's a great opportunity for you to do that.
Before we open up to the rest of the council, just because I did review the law prior to the meeting, and I know some superintendents reached out to me relative to where that requirement was stated in the law, because it's not stated in the enrolled version of the law. So I hope we get clarification on that, because I couldn't find it. Maybe somebody else could have found it. And I know, first of all, we appreciate the law because it gives us an opportunity to get to put some teeth behind the law itself. But also, in hearing the representative that actually promoted this bill, I actually heard on WWL when this bill originally was passed, on some of the language that was contained in the law was purposely done to allow systems some flexibility in the implementation of the law. And in doing so, I think some systems have done things in different ways with the intent to make it much stricter to have cell phones during the instructional day or instructional periods. So I guess first, where is it actually written in the law that I didn't see, unless there's some amended copy that I don't have, I may have pulled the wrong one. And then secondly, I guess, what is the intent of that? Are we hearing that from a system level? Because I haven't heard the concerns, I guess, from system levels. I did hear that come up during the K-12 the K-12 study group. We talk about let teachers teach, which is absolutely, but we also need to let our systems lead, right? Our system leaders lead as well. So just a couple of questions, and then I'll certainly open it up for additional comment.
I believe that provision is in the, and Mr. Walker's looked it up, I believe that provision is in the policy that Bessie has to promulgate the rule that the statute. Mr. Walker's going to confirm
So
that.
it was not in the law?
No, I think it's in the promulgation of the rules at Bessie. Mr. Walker's checking that. And did you have a second question for me?
Well, it was kind of all tied to those things. So what is the purpose? Are you hearing things that are different than, I guess, what some of us are hearing relative to the implementation of the policy?
No, I'm only hearing, well, not only, I'm mostly hearing positive. And it was important for us to try to provide as much flexibility as we could, but at the same time, you be able to say it's state law. I've spoken with teenagers and have asked them, are you using your phone? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you're telling me the truth? And no, it's state law. So just being able to say that, I think, carries some additional weight even to the kids.
I just want to say one thing. Love the law. It's worked beautifully for us. We use forethought, who I know some other districts do. So we did pass an update back in September, but it did not include everything, because I think this bulletin was updated in January. So we're going to go, I have no problems with adding these things. We're going to go back and add them, but with my board schedule, I can't have it by the 1st. That's really just a logistical piece, but I guess, and I sent an email today, I'm going to turn into one we have, I guess, and then as we update this, then I'll send the updated one. I don't know, because everything's fine, but that's just a logistical piece of getting it turned into the LDOE.
So one, I think Bessie, when they passed this, was probably August or October, but I'm not sending the policy police to. Right. So
around March 1st.
I was going to request his telecommunications funding if he doesn't get his.
So to answer your question, it is in section, as the PowerPoint says, 1141, and it is the last provision in the Bessie policy, and that policy did become effective January 2025, so it is, as we speak, brand new, so you probably wouldn't have had a copy of it. But it does say March 1st. So I guess that's what kind of threw some superintendents off. We got this. But some things like, wait, what? Let's go back. And I'll be very open and honest. We included as part of our code of conduct, which is a section, kind of section work, but it's not an actual policy procedure. So would that be the same requirement?
We want to do nothing but work with you on this.
Okay, thank you.
That's good to hear.
So I just wanted to call this to everyone's attention. I'm sure you all deal with it. Parents have to deal with it, I know. And I'm asking maybe that the State Department can provide some guidance around mental health with cell phones, because some kids really are addicted to the phone. They refuse to give up the phone. It's like it's a part of their bodies now. You know, it's like everything in life is on the phone. And I believe like for some kids, it's a real addiction. Is there something that you all can provide us, or maybe help us provide some guidance or some kind of framework around assisting kids, assisting families with this problem?
We will, we'll reach out to our partners at LDH, Louisiana Department of Health, and see if they've had it. They're the medical professionals, and both from a social scientist, counseling, and physical, if they have any resources or background on this. And because I don't have that resource, but I'm happy to have a conversation with LDH about it.
Any other council comment? No public comment? I'll entertain a motion, well, before we close. Next meeting's on March 7th at 10 a.m. Just, we'll be moved back to the morning. And can I entertain a motion to...
Sure.
Powell, Ms. Barton, all in favor say aye. Aye. Have a great morning, bro. Thank you.